Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into something that hits home for a lot of us. It's this tension, right, between
Mm.
prioritizing God's kingdom and, well, just dealing with money, our possessions, all the financial stuff that feels so immediate.
Yeah, it's a real push and pull, and we want to explore that today, the finances of it, the benefits, the risks too,
Yeah.
and how it plays out practically.
Because it's not just some abstract idea.
Not at all. And it's interesting when you look at the sources, the Bible talks about money and possessions constantly, like over 800 times.
Wow, 800, that's
It
significant.
really is. It tells you this isn't just a side issue, it's core. And there's
Yeah.
that fundamental principle. No one can serve two masters. You know
Right.
the one.
You cannot serve both God and money.
It's not saying money itself is bad, but it's about who or what gets first place, your primary allegiance.
Right. And we get the appeal of worldly stuff, comfort, security, maybe status.
Mm.
It seems tangible.
Absolutely. But then you have God's kingdom, his eternal reign, his purposes playing out right here, right now. Things like righteousness, justice, love, bigger picture stuff.
So the choice of what comes first,
Mm.
it shapes everything. And that
Yeah.
brings up stewardship, doesn't it?
Exactly. That core idea that what we have isn't really ours, we're managing it. We're managers, not owners, of resources that belong to God.
Hmm. That's a big shift in thinking.
It is. And maybe a good starting question for you listening is, looking at your finances, where do you tend to act more like an owner than, well, a manager? Just something to think about.
Okay, so if we accept that manager role, how does that look day to day? How do we practically put God's kingdom first with our money?
Well, our sources point to a pretty clear practical order. It's give, save, then live.
Give, save, live.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's presented as more than just a nice idea. It's like a biblically grounded structure for your finances.
So giving comes first.
That's the key. Giving to God's kingdom, tithing to your church, supporting causes, whatever aligns with his work, that's priority one. It's that first fruits idea.
Honoring God right off the top. Acknowledging the source.
Precisely. Before you even think about the rest. Then comes saving.
Planning for the future, taking care of your family, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Being responsible, providing for your household. Some sources even talk about building wealth to leave an inheritance, that long-term view.
Okay, so give, save,
Yeah,
and then live.
right. The living part is spending what's left after you've given and saved, which naturally means sometimes you have to adjust your lifestyle to fit.
That requires some intention.
Definitely. And that's where something like a budget comes in. It's not about restriction, really. It's a tool. It helps you make sure your money actually goes where you intend it to, following those priorities.
Makes sense.
And the sources also stress being diligent, patient. Building wealth takes time. They really caution against those get-rich-quick schemes.
Yeah, those rarely end well.
Right. And also investing only in what you actually understand. Basic wisdom, but crucial.
So it's a good moment for you listening to maybe pause and think. Does my current financial system formal budget or not actually follow that order? Give first, then save, then live on the rest.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the good stuff. What happens when we actually do this? What are the benefits?
Okay.
Well, the first big one our sources highlight is, maybe surprisingly, increased resources and blessings.
How does that work?
It's tied to that idea of faithfulness. Being faithful, responsible with what you have now, even if it feels small, leads to being trusted with more later.
Like proving you can handle it.
Sort of, yeah. And it connects to what some call the seed principle. You sow resources into good ground, giving, wise saving, investing, and it has the potential to multiply.
Seed principle, I like that. So you need seed to sow.
Exactly. Which means you need to live on less than you make. If you consume everything, you've got no seed left to plant and grow.
Makes sense. Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about like a young professional just starting out. Maybe not a huge salary, but they commit to giving a percentage right away, and they consistently save another portion.
Okay.
That discipline builds good habits. Maybe over time, their income grows, partly because they're managing well, making wise choices, and now they have more to give, more to save. It becomes a positive cycle.
Right. It builds on itself.
It really can. So maybe ask yourself, where could I be a little more faithful, a little more intentional with the resources I have right now, whatever the amount?
Good question. What's another benefit?
Peace, freedom, less stress. That's a big one.
Well, I think we could all use more of that when it comes to money.
Absolutely. And think about budgeting again. Having that plan, knowing where your money's going, it gives you a sense of control, right? Helps you hit your goals.
Yeah, it takes away some of the guesswork and anxiety.
And living below your means, that breaks the paycheck to paycheck cycle, which is incredibly stressful for so many people.
For sure. And what about debt?
Big factor. The sources are pretty strong on this. Getting out of debt is liberating. The borrower is slave to the lender. Paying down debt gives you back your freedom, your options.
So this whole disciplined approach, it builds confidence, reduces that constant worry.
It really can. Imagine a couple, maybe they used to argue about money all the time. It was a huge stressor.
Yeah, that's common.
So they decide, okay, let's make a budget. Let's prioritize giving, saving, and attacking our debt. Suddenly, they have a plan. They're working together. That reduces the stress immensely, improves their whole relationship.
That makes a huge difference.
It does. So think about it. What kind of peace, what kind of freedom could you gain with a bit more financial discipline? What's maybe one step you could take, even a small one, to reduce some of that financial stress?
Okay, so we have increased resources, peace, and freedom. What's the third benefit?
The third one is really about impact. It's the ability to genuinely serve other people and to help fund God's purposes in the world.
Right, because if you're managing well and living below your means,
You create margin. You have a surplus. And that surplus isn't just for piling up more stuff. It's available for generosity beyond your regular giving.
so you can respond to needs as they come up.
Exactly. Help someone in your community, support a ministry doing good work, contribute more to missions. Our sources really frame being a giver as a core purpose of having resources in the first place, from a Christian perspective.
It's not just about accumulating, it's about distributing.
Yes. Think of a family who decides, okay, we're going to live on 80% of our income. That extra 20% is now available for extra saving, yes, but also for intentional generosity.
So they could help a neighbor with unexpected medical bills, or give a significant gift to their church's building fund, or support a missionary.
Right. They have the capacity to do that. There's a real joy and purpose in being able to use God's blessings to bless others and advance his kingdom.
Okay, those are some compelling benefits. But we need to look at the other side too. What are the risks if we don't prioritize God's kingdom financially?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first risk is probably the most serious actual spiritual harm. It can hinder your faith.
How so?
Well, back to that core idea. You can't serve two masters. Trying to put money first or even equal with God just doesn't work. It creates internal conflict.
And the Bible warns about the love of money, right?
Very strongly. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. There's a direct quote. It can lead you into temptation, into traps. The sources use words like ruin and destruction. It's serious stuff. And riches themselves can be deceitful. They can promise happiness or security they can't deliver. And they can actually choke out the effectiveness of God's word in your life.
Yeah.
Greed harms you financially and spiritually.
So it's not just about bad investments.
No, it goes deeper. There's this idea of worldliness, getting too attached to temporary things, being fundamentally opposed to a relationship with God.
Can you give an example of how this might play out?
Sure, maybe someone gets hyper-focused on climbing the career ladder solely for the money. And slowly, without really noticing, their faith life fades. Church attendance drops, prayer stops, maybe their values start to shift.
Or someone else gets tempted by a risky, sure-thing investment out of greed.
And they lose a lot, right. But the damage isn't just financial. There's often huge spiritual distress, guilt, maybe broken trust with others.
It forces some tough self-reflection.
It really does. You have to ask yourself, honestly, is my relationship with money, how I pursue it, how I use it, is it negatively impacting my spiritual life in any way?
Okay, spiritual harm is the first risk. What's the second?
Financial instability and losing your freedom. This is maybe more obvious, but still critical.
So spending everything you get.
Yeah, if you consume all your resources, live right up to the edge, maybe even beyond, you have zero buffer. No reserve for emergencies, job loss, unexpected repairs, anything.
You're vulnerable.
Totally vulnerable. And it forces you into desperate decisions sometimes. Taking out high-interest loans, selling things you need. And again, debt becomes a trap.
Right, slave to the lender.
Exactly. It limits your choices, your ability to move, to change jobs, to respond to God's leading, maybe. A lack of self-control in spending just makes you fragile financially.
Like the person living large, maxing out credit cards.
And then they lose their job. Suddenly, with no savings, they're in a terrible situation. High-interest debt piles up. Stress goes through the roof. It's a downward spiral. Very little freedom left.
Okay, that's a clear risk. What's the third one?
The third risk is about, well, the potential loss of the wealth itself, and maybe more significantly, missing the opportunity for eternal impact.
Loss of wealth. How?
Well, the wisdom literature suggests that wealth just hoarded, not used productively or generously, can actually be harmful and can even disappear. Think moths and rust, or bad investments, or just mismanagement over time.
And the eternal impact part.
That connects to the parable of the rich fool, you know?
Yeah.
The guy who built bigger barns just to store all his stuff, planning to relax and enjoy it.
Yeah, and God wasn't impressed.
Not at all. The point was he was storing up treasure for himself on earth, but was not rich toward God. He missed the whole point.
So by hoarding, or just focusing only on earthly accumulation?
You miss the chance to store up treasures in heaven, to invest in things that last forever through giving, through serving, through supporting God's work. It's a fundamental missed opportunity to use God-given resources for eternal purposes.
Can you paint a picture of that?
Imagine someone who works hard, builds up a lot of wealth, but never really embraces generosity. They just keep accumulating. Maybe they die and the kids mismanage it, or it gets tied up in taxes, or it just sort of evaporates.
So it has no lasting kingdom impact.
None. It's like the rich fool lots of earthly stuff for a while, but ultimately nothing truly lasting was built with it. No eternal return on investment, so to speak.
That's sobering. So another point for reflection for you, the listener, is there an area where maybe a lack of financial discipline is currently limiting your freedom or creating potential instability down the road?
So we've looked at the principles, the benefits, the risks. How does this all play out in our relationships? Let's start with family.
Okay. Yeah, money stuff in families can be tricky.
It really can. Financial stress is like one of the top reasons for conflict, isn't it? But the flip side is, when a family gets on the same page financially, aligning with these principles, it can actually bring harmony.
How so?
Talking openly about a budget, saving together for goals, deciding together where to give, that builds unity. It strengthens the family, and it's a powerful way to model these values for your kids.
And there's that idea of providing for your own household too, right?
Absolutely. Diligence in providing, planning for the future, even thinking about leaving an inheritance that's part of biblical responsibility within the family context.
Okay, what about friends and neighbors?
Well, there's that interesting phrase about using worldly wealth to gain friends.
What does that mean? Buying friends?
No, not like that. It's more about using your resources generously to build relationships, to be a blessing to people, to meet needs. It's about demonstrating God's love in practical ways, sharing what you have.
So your generosity becomes a bridge.
Exactly. It shows people you care. It reflects God's character. It can open doors for deeper connection and witness.
And then colleagues, or work life.
Yeah, the principles apply there too. First, we're encouraged to work diligently, use our talents well to earn a living. That itself is a form of stewardship.
Our work ethic matters.
It does. And then our financial habits at work, our honesty, our integrity, whether we're known as generous or tight-fisted, that's a testimony. People notice.
Yep.
And the income we earn from work, that's a resource we can then steward well, supporting God's kingdom, demonstrating these principles, not just in church, but out in the marketplace.
So it all connects.
It really does. Look, prioritizing God's kingdom financially, it's a choice, a strategic choice we make day by day.
And as we've seen, it has real, tangible benefits, potentially more resources, definitely more peace, and the ability to make a lasting impact.
Right. And ignoring it has real risks, spiritual damage, financial instability, and missing out on that eternal perspective, that chance for true impact.
And it touches every part of our lives, all our relationships.
Yeah, So maybe a final next step for you listening. Think about one specific relationship, family, friend, neighbor, colleague, just one.
Okay.
And ask yourself, what's one practical, tangible thing I could do this week in that relationship to demonstrate biblical financial stewardship, or just to be a blessing to that person financially in some way?
That's a great actionable takeaway.
And maybe something else to just, mull over after this deep dive. What does it really mean to be rich toward God? How is that different from just being rich in worldly terms? And what small daily steps can actually help us cultivate that kind of lasting eternal richness?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into something that hits home for a lot of us. It's this tension, right, between prioritizing God's kingdom and, well, just dealing with money, our possessions, all the financial stuff that feels so immediate.
Yeah, it's a real push and pull, and we want to explore that today, the finances of it, the benefits, the risks too,
Yeah.
and how it plays out practically.
Because it's not just some abstract idea.
Not at all. And it's interesting when you look at the sources, the Bible talks about money and possessions constantly, like over 800 times.
Wow, 800, that's
It
significant.
really is. It tells you this isn't just a side issue, it's core. And there's
Yeah.
that fundamental principle. No one can serve two masters. You
Right.
know the one.
You cannot serve both God and money.
It's not saying money itself is bad, but it's about who or what gets first place, your primary allegiance.
Right. And we get the appeal of worldly stuff, comfort, security, maybe status. It seems tangible.
Absolutely. But then you have God's kingdom, his eternal reign, his purposes playing out right here, right now. Things like righteousness, justice, love, bigger picture stuff.
So the choice of what comes first,
Mm.
it shapes everything. And that
Yeah.
brings up stewardship, doesn't it?
Exactly. That core idea that what we have isn't really ours, we're managing it. We're managers, not owners, of resources that belong to God.
That's a big shift in thinking.
It is. And maybe a good starting question for you listening is, looking at your finances, where do you tend to act more like an owner than, well, a manager? Just something to think about.
Okay, so if we accept that manager role, how does that look day to day? How do we practically put God's kingdom first with our money?
Well, our sources point to a pretty clear practical order. It's give, save, then live.
Give, save, live.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's presented as more than just a nice idea. It's like a biblically grounded structure for your finances.
So giving comes first.
That's the key. Giving to God's kingdom, tithing to your church, supporting causes, whatever aligns with his work, that's priority one. It's that first fruits idea.
Honoring God right off the top. Acknowledging the source.
Precisely. Before you even think about